Moscow is on edge. Ukraine strikes deeper, harder and smarter, and the results are changing the course of the war. While our new precision weapons reshape the battlefield, Russian forces are losing ground and propaganda can no longer hide the truth. In Pokrovsk, the occupiers' flag has been torn down. Meanwhile, world leaders are on the move. Trump meets Xi in South Korea as global power dynamics shift. Ukraine's allies are sending more air defense systems to strengthen our skies, while inside Russia, its once mighty gas industry is collapsing under the weight of war and sanctions. What's next for both sides, and how these changes could redefine the global balance? All the details in our special edition of Hotspot. The war is now hitting deep inside Russia, and Ukraine's advanced weapons are redefining the battlefield. With each new strike, Ukrainian drones and missiles are taking out critical military targets, exposing the illusion of Russia's security. These precision attacks are growing more sophisticated and frequent. In this report, we'll explore the technology behind Ukraine's latest operations and how these breakthroughs could shape the future of the war.
Distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers are no obstacle for Ukrainian weaponry. Russian oil refineries
Well, that's clear. The refineries are fucked. That's obvious even without saying it.
key facilities of the military-industrial complex and the Russian war machine.
Honestly, it's a nightmare. Damn, it's getting wild.
And recently, in response to the ongoing shelling of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, the Ukrainian armed forces have also started targeting Russia's critical infrastructure.
No way, fuck! No way, fuck!
Eric, look.
Where are we going? What a ride! No way, fuck!
When the Kremlin threatens Ukrainians with blackouts, Russians should also prepare for a cold and harsh winter.
If they threaten blackouts, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
For a long time, Western allies restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory, as a result of which Ukraine expanded its own long-range arsenal. According to the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov, today 99% of strikes on Russian oil refineries are carried out with Ukrainian weapons.
At the time when all this started, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your opinion that this is the correct interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own domestic production. It is precisely our domestic production that has given us the ability to use our forces and resources the way we see fit.
The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and defense industry. In particular, the domestic production of long-range drones and missiles with which Ukraine regularly strikes targets in Russia, located thousands of kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their air force. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at Russia's military-industrial enterprises and energy system. This is
Belgorod. There's no electricity anywhere in Belgorod at all.
If the simplest drones to manufacture are used for strikes on Russian oil refineries, jet-powered drones are better suited for targeting military-industrial facilities, like the Polyanitya, Peklo and Bars types. Their technical specifications are not disclosed. Experts suggest that the range of these jet-powered drones is between 500 and 700 kilometers. The main advantage is their low cost compared to cruise missile competitors.
These are the two places that are the most significant. Cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which are the most protected by the Russian Federation's air defense systems, could start getting hit every evening. Bars will be able to reach them, and I believe this should happen systematically.
For dessert, Ukrainian long-range missiles are in store for the occupiers. Long-range Neptunes and Flamingos with ranges of 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers respectively. The Ukrainian Pink Bird, in addition to its enormous range, impresses with a warhead weight of about 1,000 kilograms.
usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? when it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles can completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists shelling Ukrainian cities must realize that a mirrored response will come. It will definitely happen.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ukraine's defense forces have removed the Russian flag that occupiers had placed at the entrance to Pokrovsk, a clear signal that the city remains firmly under Ukrainian control. Meanwhile, Ukrainian commanders have dismissed Moscow's claims about the encirclement of Kupiansk and Pokrovsk as complete propaganda. Russian forces continue to take heavy losses as Ukrainian troops hold their positions and advance on several fronts. More details in our full report.
Ukraine is once again under the occupiers' crosshairs. The Russians have launched a massive attack with missiles and drones. Tensions are also rising on the front line. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where the intensity of fighting is high. A large number of occupiers are concentrated there. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold by any means necessary.
The main tactic of the Russian small assault groups is to try to create an operational encirclement of Ukraine's defense forces directly in Pokrovsk itself. At the moment, the actual line of contact is at the key defensive positions of Ukraine's defense forces, the so-called citadel. Despite the extremely difficult situation, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out successful counteroffensive actions, and at the moment, the area under the control of Ukraine's defense forces has increased to 200 square kilometers.
Fierce fighting continues in the Kupiansk area of the Kharkiv region. The occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no question of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The situation in Minograd and its surroundings is also fully controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces.
At the moment, the main efforts of the occupiers are not aimed at blocking Ukraine's defense forces directly in Kupiansk, but rather at the possibility of breaking through to the Kupiansk logistics hub. The occupiers need control over this key railway station in order to use the short logistics route from the territory of the Russian Federation and the occupied areas of Luhansk region to form a strike group, whose goal will be to advance along the Oskil River toward the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Meanwhile, Putin has come out with a new scare tactic. The bunker dweller continues to talk about the successful tests of Russia's so-called wonder weapon.
This is an underwater, unmanned underwater device, which is called Poseidon, and it is also equipped with a nuclear power unit. For the first time, we were able to successfully not only launch the system from the carrier submarine using the booster engine, but also to start up the nuclear power unit.
But Putin did not provide any evidence of the tests. No information about the location, route, duration, or any other details was disclosed.
Neither the Poseidon nor accordingly the Burevestnik have been put into mass production or placed on combat duty. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason to talk about any threat from these mythological Russian Wunderwaffe to NATO or directly to the United States.
But despite this, the ALCO President Medvedev called the Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. Let us recall that the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that if Russia strikes the country's capital, NATO members will wipe Moscow off the face of the earth.
These are in essence nothing more than mere information stunts or publicity maneuvers, which the Western allies over time have completely stopped reacting to or even acknowledging in any significant way. And the reaction of the Russian Federation's ambassador to Belgium in response to the statement made by that country's defense minister is quite telling and revealing, as it clearly demonstrates a state of complete confusion, lack of preparedness, and an inability to respond adequately to such a tough, direct, and unequivocal statement coming from one of the NATO bloc members, which is a significant and influential alliance.
Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements, Donald Trump has moved to action. The American president instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing.
On the nuclear weapons test of the United States, this is a strong and resolute military response from the country and President Trump to such information stunts by the Russian Federation. Moreover, Trump stated very firmly that the United States possesses the world's leading nuclear capability. Russia is in second place and China is conditionally third.
At the same time, the US has begun a large-scale reduction of its military presence in Eastern Europe.
On the one hand, while announcing such plans during the rotation period, I want to emphasize once again, the United States is increasing its nuclear presence in European countries. Let me emphasize again, this includes the redeployment of nuclear arsenals to the United Kingdom, the redeployment of nuclear submarines, and the presence of an American aircraft carrier in Denmark's territorial waters. In other words, all of this actually indicates a significant strengthening of the US military presence right near the border with the Russian Federation.
US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping held their first meeting since the start of Trump's second term in the South Korean city of Busan. The discussion reportedly focused on trade relations, regional security, and China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Following the talks, President Trump described the meeting as very positive, noting that communication between Washington and Beijing remains open and constructive. What was really discussed behind closed doors? More in our report.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his tour of the Indo-Pacific region. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They agreed to develop a more forward-looking joint agenda for political dialogue, which in principle is a very positive outcome of this meeting. In
the result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff from 20% to 10%. This tariff concerns Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic. The overall level of US tariffs will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone away. And these are very important questions, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Trump said that these issues were not raised diplomatically. But in such cases, when you don't reach an agreement, you just say that you didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine turned out to be less effective, despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. Initially, Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. Whether the parties reached an agreement in this regard was not announced.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And in order to risk that, Xi would need something in return. He would have to receive something more substantial and significant in exchange, something that would match the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Given that, for now, relations are more strongly reminiscent of a logic of de-escalatory actions, particularly in the trade and economic sphere. I wouldn't say that a strategic alliance or a formal dialogue has been established between Washington and Beijing.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statement, we see that there won't be any tariffs on Chinese goods and there will be access for American agricultural products. It seems like a good statement. But how true that really is, again, looking at Trump's presidency, we remember, for example, Trump's claim that peace had been achieved in the Middle East after 3,000 years. You know, I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even remotely resemble achieving peace to me in that region. So, Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China, that everything is wonderful. But let's at least wait 48 hours and then see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, the Chinese leader will make a return visit to the United States.
Ukraine's partners are stepping up efforts to strengthen the country's air defense system. To protect Ukrainian skies from relentless Russian attacks, new advanced weaponry is already on its way from the United Kingdom and Germany. The upcoming deliveries are expected to include modern air defense systems, missiles, and radar technology aimed at countering drones and cruise missiles more effectively. These supplies will significantly boost Ukraine's defensive capabilities and help shield civilians and critical infrastructure from ongoing bombardments. More details in our full report.
Russia is intensifying its strikes on Ukraine's energy system and changing its attack tactics. Moscow is launching hundreds of drones capable of bypassing air defense systems and equipped with cameras featuring improved targeting.
Russia has turned its strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure into a systematic operation aimed not just at temporarily damaging the networks, but at destroying the viability of large areas of the country. On the eve of winter, The goal of the attacks is to deprive regions of heat and electricity, undermine industry, provoke mass emigration, and create political pressure on Kiev, writes The Economist. In
these circumstances, air defense becomes critically important. But this year, Western partners are acting proactively, strengthening Ukraine's skies and energy system before the cold sets in.
We are not just now starting to prepare for this winter period. We began preparations back at the end of the previous winter season.
As early as November, the UK will begin serial production of Ukrainian Octopus air defense drones, a joint project between Kiev and London, designed for the rapid protection of the skies from enemy drones and missiles.
our Ukrainian friends will share their technologies and intellectual property with the UK, and in turn, we will further develop them and produce them on a large scale so that we can deliver to Ukraine every month. Thousands of interceptor drones, said El Carnes, the UK's Deputy Secretary of State for the Armed Forces in Parliament.
These drones will become part of a system called the Air Shield. It will integrate Western air defense systems such as Patriot, Airstream, NASAMS, as well as new mobile units, which Germany and other allies are providing to Ukraine before the start of winter. The first drones will be tested by Ukrainian military personnel. If the tests are successful, production will be expanded, and some of the drones will likely be manufactured directly in Ukraine. At the same time, the UK authorities are expanding their multi-purpose missile production program. It is planned to deliver 5,000 units of this weapon to Ukraine to strengthen its air defense.
We are also announcing an increase in the production program in the UK to provide Ukraine with 5,000 new multi-purpose missiles. This will create new jobs in Belfast and other cities, as well as strengthen Ukraine's air defense for the coming winter.
At the same time, European allies are stepping up their support for Ukraine's energy sector. Germany and other NATO countries are mobilizing resources, from air defense missiles to support for the energy sector, so that Ukraine can withstand the winter and resist attacks on critical infrastructure.
Germany has already paid 390 million euros, with another 30 million to come. We agreed on this in the summer, but today I want to announce that we will invest an additional 30 million. Thus, we are providing a total of 450 million euros. This money will make it possible to acquire the necessary technical equipment to save Ukraine.
In addition, EU countries are preparing a winter support package. To the already provided 3 billion euros, a new guarantee of 800 million has been added for the emergency purchase of gas. This was reported by the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katarina Maternova. The aid covers the repair of power grids and the supply of generators and transformers.
We have also provided and continue to provide a lot of assistance in the energy sector, not only generators for people and businesses, but also transformer and compressor stations to help restore power grids, gas distribution networks, and compressors that supply gas from storage facilities which have been distributed. We also provide financial support to state-owned enterprises and major energy companies for the repair of their equipment. We also supply more than 2 gigawatts of electricity per day.
Thus, support for Ukraine this winter is reaching a new level, from modern air defense systems to reliable energy supply. And whatever the Kremlin may be planning, Ukraine, together with its allies, is striving not just for tactical success but for strategic success, to withstand the cold, to preserve strength, and to maintain the ability to defend itself.
Russia's gas industry is facing an undeniable downturn. Across the country, factories are shutting down, production is losing pace, and overall industrial output continues to drop. Despite Putin's constant claims that the situation is under control, reality suggests otherwise. Years of war and sanctions have drained Russia's financial and industrial resources, leaving little room for recovery. Can Moscow still reverse the trend, or is the decline already irreversible? More on this in our next report.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion. Claims about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts.
Honestly, there's really no other way to put it. Well, this truly isn't our choice, and we certainly do not want things to develop or progress in this particular way.
Putin is trying to bluff and save face by creating an illusion of success, but it's all in vain. The Russian economy is rapidly going downhill. Almost 80% of the country's industry has fallen into a state of recession.
When we talk about individual sectors, it means that production in these sectors, compared to the same period, usually the previous year, has gotten worse. In other words, things aren't improving, they're getting worse. And recession is exactly this kind of deterioration, when you're in the red, and when a recession becomes prolonged, when it's not just 1 year, but say 3 or 4 years of decline, then it's no longer a recession, it's a depression.
Finally, since September, the overall growth of industrial production in Russia has slowed to just 0.3% year-on-year. That's almost 19 times less than last year.
There simply aren't enough people available to work in the necessary roles, and in addition to that, there is just not enough money or financial resources to pay for the delivery and transportation of essential components, or to actually purchase and acquire the goods and materials you need for the processing of your products. So, as a direct result of these combined challenges, you ultimately end up producing a smaller quantity, or less, than you otherwise would be able to under better circumstances. And when you produce less, there you have it, a recession, a negative compared to the previous period.
The decline is especially sharp in those civilian sectors that were supposed to replace the products of foreign companies that left Russia after the start of the full-scale war.
The collapse of import substitution. There were plans to replace everything, but to do that, you have to actually produce what you're going to use as a substitute. And if you're not producing what you need to substitute, then how are you supposed to carry out this import substitution when you're not making anything at all? In other words, any economic downturn inevitably means that goods are not being produced. And if they're not being produced, there's no point in keeping the people who make them. And that means unemployment. Unemployment is always an unpleasant situation.
As a result, the domestic market is deprived of consumer goods, and Russian factories are unable to make up for the shortage.
Even now, it would seem the military sector, part of the military sector, which is the production of weapons and ammunition, in September of this year compared to September of last year, in Russia, it's down by as much as, 1.3%. So even the production of weapons and ammunition is already in decline. What can we say about the rest of the economy, which is showing even worse results?
The central bank has predicted that Russia could face its worst economic downturn since the 1990s if sanctions are tightened. If the situation does not improve, by 2026 the Kremlin could lose $108 billion in export revenues.
Here, the problems are, let's say, just gaining momentum for now, but the first signs we see are that taxes in Russia have been rising since the beginning of the year. The sales tax will be introduced on December 1st, and the environmental tax is increasing almost tenfold starting November 1st, which is literally in just a week or even a couple of days. So it turns out that all these various economic problems are cropping up more and more often, and they keep appearing in the news because, it's like when you don't have a good option.
Russian Sberbank, following Gazprom, has begun mass layoffs. In the first quarter, the staff of the largest bank, which holds half of all individual deposits, decreased by 8,600 employees, in the second quarter by 3,500, and in the third by 1,500.
And Sberbank of Russia, when they see that right now, just quoting the head of Sberbank, Herman Greff, throughout 2025, there is not a single new investment project that Sberbank is working on. So the people responsible for this area, well, they have nothing to do. And since they have nothing to do, there's no point in paying them a salary. They're being laid off. So laying people off is a demonstration that there is no demand for the economic functions that Sberbank provides. And accordingly, these people are being cut. But this is just one of many examples.
That's the reality. Only Putin is trying to hide all of this. But there's nowhere left to hide. The economy is cracking. The country is losing money.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish Frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!